So by now you've all seen the latest CPI report showing that inflation didn't quite go down at the rate we would have desired. This got me thinking, what are the positive impacts of inflation, if any at all? I mean, with the constant cycle of negative news surrounding the topic, I was thinking it would be nice to shed some light on some possible positives. And the economy never disappoints. On this episode, we're going to be looking into how the inflation could actually be helping make Americans healthier. This is the Backseat Economist. Remember, facts change, numbers never lie.
So consumerism is the engine, the lifeblood of the U.S. economy, and really any economy for that matter. And before I get into the meat and potatoes here of what I'm theorizing on, I want to talk about a few just general economic principles. One being the types of goods that economists will study. And these goods are kind of classified into four different categories, really three main ones, and one last one, the Giffen category, being kind of a subcategory of the inferior category. So let's start at normal goods. Normal goods are considered goods that are going to increase in demand as the consumer's income level increases. So these are goods that the consumer has to spend money on, regardless of how much or how little money they are making. And then you have inferior goods. Inferior goods are goods that are going to decrease in demand as income levels increase for consumers. So these are goods that are essentially only being consumed basically when the consumer has very little income. These are going to be cheaply made, widely accessible goods. When you've got luxury items or luxury goods, which are the complete opposite of inferior goods, and basically these are goods that are only going to increase in demand at higher levels of income. So these are goods that are considered to be highly valued and going to be not anywhere near as accessible as normal or inferior goods. And then you have a Giffen good, which is essentially an inferior good with very few, basically no substitutes. So the demand continues to rise even if the price increases. Now, economists classify these goods in this way to understand how consumers will make their choices in the face of rising income or lowering of income, or rising in demand, or rising in prices of the associated goods. Now, this change in how the good is consumed in relation to the price is called the elasticity of that good. And essentially what this is measuring is how much of a change in price or how much of a change in income will affect the change in demand of such a good. So for example, a normal good is said to be inelastic. Consumers are going to want to consume normal goods regardless because they're essential basically to life. So you'll see normal goods being classified as being very inelastic. So the change in price that you might see for a normal good is not going to result in a very large change, a large deviation of change in demand. Versus, say, luxury or inferior good, where a change in price or a change in income very well, and depending on what type of good, very well will change the demand, the quantity demanded of such a good. So inflation has been on the rise now for about 2 years. The Fed has taken action to raise interest rates and to sell off their bonds and security account ledger. At the same time that things have been getting more expensive, wage growth, average U.S. pay, has been increasing as well, but at a smaller rate. So the overall net effect is that consumer dollars have been decreased over time. Wage growth has not kept up with inflation, so Americans are losing money out of their pay. So with this decrease in effective pay or income, you would expect that all inferior goods, like we discussed earlier in the video, would see a smaller demand. So we would see less consumption of what would be determined inferior goods. Now, fast food has always been considered an inferior good, meaning as people's income goes up, people should be consuming fast food less. Just so there's no confusion here, obesity is very much so linked to the poor nutritional habits of Americans. And of course, obesity comes with all kinds of added risks to your health, like high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, cancer, fatty liver disease, osteoarthritis, and increased exposure to death from COVID-19. It's said that about a third of all COVID-19 deaths had a comorbidity of obesity. Now, with this increase in inflation and therefore the relative decrease in income, you would expect to see a thought to be inferior good like a fast food industry controlled by a major empire like Yum Brands would see record profit and higher revenue all around. But when we look at the financials for Yum, which controls KFC, Taco Bell, and the Pizza Hut enterprises, we see that we had a relatively small increase, about 3.92%, last year in revenue, and an overall decrease in 15.8% in net profit. Let's switch over to another major fast food empire, McDonald's. We see they also had a net income decrease of 18% and an actual revenue decrease of about 0.17%. Now, to accurately compare the consumption of fast food, we must look at what people would substitute with fast food. Now, in my eyes, the only close substitute would be actually grocery shopping. And when we look at the major owners of the grocery retailers, this is Ahold Delhaize, which is the parent company of Giant Foods. We see that we have a massive revenue increase, 1.16% compared to fiscal year 2020, and we have a massive net income increase of 60%. We'll also take a look at Albertsons Companies, which owns the Safeway food brands. They also have a revenue increase, 3.15%, and another massive net income increase of 90.5%. I look over here to the Center for Disease Control and their new study, which shows basically this in writing in statistic analysis. And what it shows is that fast food is consumed by people who are less than 130% of the federal poverty level at the lowest rates. So effectively, people who make the lowest amount of income consume the lowest amount of fast food, and looks like about 31%. People in middle income areas, right, about 130 to 350% of the federal poverty level, at about 36%. In the higher income levels, 350% plus of the federal poverty level at 42%. So this shows the exact opposite, again, of what most economists had theorized, which was that fast food was an inferior good and therefore poorer people would be consuming more of it. So I believe this is because, by definition, fast food is actually being treated as a luxury good, or a good for which demand increases more than what is proportional as income rises. And as we saw, as income rises, people are consuming far more fast food than at lower income levels. Now, considering that nearly 1 in 3 adults are overweight and 2 in 5 are obese, I think treating fast food as a luxury item is a great thing for the time being, considering that inflation is not going to really ease up anytime soon. We should hopefully see a more healthy, nutritional diet overall for Americans as they make the switch from fast food over to cooking and more grocery shopping. Now, I'm not going to leave you hanging here. At this point, you might be wondering, why would people choose to consume more fast food at higher income levels? I mean, I thought it's kind of counterintuitive. Now, the idea here, for at least my theory on this, and we're going to actually have a new video in regards to the leisure work time model, which is a separate study of economics, labor economics. But essentially, the idea here, in my opinion, is that it is not the income that matters, but the time. The idea here is that as people work and they reach higher levels of income, their time becomes more expensive. This actually works in reverse very well for this scenario as well. But as their time becomes more expensive, they choose to use that time to work more in order to make more, so that they can have higher overall consumption levels, right? And so cooking time, grocery shopping time, would not any longer be a good choice, considering how expensive it is now to take the time to do those things. So fast food will actually see an increase in consumption because obviously it's quicker. Again, the reverse works well here in that as inflation decreases the disposable income of most U.S. citizens, now your time is actually less expensive, right? So now the opportunity cost of taking time, because your disposable income, the income you're actually making is less due to inflation. Now that time is more affordable and you can do things like cook and grocery shop, because the opportunity cost of cooking and grocery shopping isn't quite as expensive anymore because your income is less. So we truly hope that this inflationary environment does help wean Americans off of this fast food addiction and hopefully improve not just obesity and overweight numbers, but overall health for the country. This is not a hot topic for economists at the moment. There's not many other people I see discussing inflationary effects on nutrition of Americans, but the numbers don't lie. I mean, we see that there's a clear separation from people using fast food as a way to save time, and people are starting to consume grocery items. And we think this is a great thing, and hopefully this content was valuable to you. Please subscribe, and until next time.